I just want to thank everyone so much for coming out this evening. My name is Andrea Pierre. I'm the Community Engagement Director at Minnesota Public Radio. We're gathering here tonight at the Pillsbury House and Theater that is just blocks away from where George Floyd was murdered. And we want to come here tonight to reflect and listen and engage for a powerful conversation with some local community leaders, and a conversation hosted by one of our wonderful community journalists, award-winning journalist, Angela Davis from Minnesota Public Radio. But I want to turn it over. We have a special treat. Janata Petrus is the city's poet laureate, and she's going to do a little sweetening of the space for us, because this is South Minneapolis, and I'm really excited to have you here. So come on, Janata. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for the invitation. Hi, everybody. Is this song on? Thank y'all so much for being here. This is like such a special space. I've gotten to do so many amazing things out of Pillsbury House. I went to daycare at Pillsbury House. So I ain't new to this, I'm true to this. I know this place. And have done countless performances, and my mom has cooked out of here. So, I think it's also, as Drea shared, in proximity to this thing that's happened, and it's continued to absorb kind of like the metabolization and processing of this. And today I was hanging out with some kids from Southside Family School and taking them on field trips. We actually went to the 3rd precinct. And beforehand, I really wanted to check in with them in their bodies and their spirits, and was like, what do y'all remember about 5 years ago? And these are kids who are 12 and 13. And this is about to be a moment where people are going to be talking about this a lot. I was invited and commissioned to write a poem in honor of him this year. And I want to premiere it here in Pillsbury House, in my house, in honor of him as we process this. All we really know was his last living desire was for a cigarette. In other words, a simple and neat, quick and light burn of personal tobacco. Inhale, throat heat, and exhale. For a moment, the brain pauses and buzzes. For a moment, the heart is a soft float and you belong to you. Native homies give the offering of tobacco, soft hands cup gratitude. Put a little tobacco here for your ancestors, their witness, their earthly nostalgia for earthly life and earthly pleasure. The more expensive it is to live, the more worthless power treats our life. Charge rent on the sky, put our access to blue behind a paywall. Give you gray when you pass due. Some would never see the blue. Colonize butterflies and enslave bees. Give the man his cigarettes. Give him his free. All we really know about him is that we will never know him. He is somewhere here, elsewhere, gone. Lips thickly African, eyes deeply seeing. From the beyond into us. But wait, in the other dimension, it was all a dream. Daughter's an adult woman, dad is old, moves slowly, Stacey Adams and Kane, gray beard, wrinkled hands. She grown and vigilant, hide his cigarettes from him. She asks him about his blood. She asks him about his sugar. She asks him about his heart. Makes him fresh mint tea with dark honey. His afterlives are crystallized in a lost amber, a hard honey. Let him be free, carefree. Let him be a nostalgic old man that tell the same story again and again. About back home, about being a boy, about the sky in summer, the glitter green of bugs against the night. Let his grown children cook him greens and cornbread, something from home, from North Carolina. If we dream together, he is an anonymous man. We don't know his name. We don't know what he looks like when he is afraid. There were no fires, no marches, no protests, no rhetoric or debates, no saying of his name, no murals painted of his face. He is not a symbol. He is just a man with a life of delicious mundane, cigarettes and fireflies. We could dream him anonymous, and he could have smoked that pack, burnt down every last stick of herbal and toxic burn, of slim, cheap thrills, of a small burning meditation, that he could have been passed in the street, just another somebody, another unknown, a martyr to none. Thank you all.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to North Star Journey Live. This is a project by NPR News that focuses on Minnesota's diverse communities. I'm Angela Davis, and I am just thrilled to be here on this day, here in South Minneapolis, where 5 years ago, we know that a global racial reckoning began. That movement grew after a murder that was literally seen around the world. Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin calmly kneeling on the neck of George Floyd for more than 9 minutes while George repeatedly said, "I can't breathe." Video of those horrific moments rocketed from phone to phone, from media to media, and sparked an uprising that swept across the planet. But for Black communities here in Minneapolis, George Floyd's murder is just a chapter of a much longer story. Long before 2020, we know that people have been organizing and creating and demanding change. And certainly in the immediate aftermath of George's murder and Derek Chauvin's conviction, progress was made. Businesses and institutions promised to invest in racial equity, to develop new community practices, to reckon with systems of harm. But in the neighborhoods where George Floyd lived and died, has that change taken root? That's what we're going to talk about right now. Those are the questions that we are asking. I'm at Pillsbury House Theater in Minneapolis with a group of Black leaders to have a very candid conversation about healing and restoration and justice. And we have a live audience. Thank you all for being here this evening. First, as we introduce our guests, I want to make sure you know that we have Angela Harrelson here right next to me. Angela is George Floyd's aunt who lives here in Minnesota.
Hey, everybody.
Yeah. You're still among family here with us as well. She's a nurse and an entrepreneur. Good to see you, Angela.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next to her is Janelle Austin. Janelle, I've had the privilege of talking to you a few times over the last 5 years. Her family lives in the neighborhood where George Floyd was murdered, and she now serves as the executive director of Rise and Remember, which does so much of the work, a lot of the work at George Floyd Square, which we surely will be talking about today. It's good to see you again, Janelle.
Thank you.
Hi. Next to Janelle, we have Jerome Richardson with us. In 2020, when he was in high school, Jerome responded to the uprising after George Floyd's murder by launching Minnesota Teen Activists, which eventually became Global Teen Activists. That group organizes and rallies young people to enact change. Nice to meet you, Jerome.
Thank you.
Behind them, we have Anthony Taylor. Anthony is a community development lead for the Cultural Wellness Center and founder of Melanin in Motion, a movement that connects Black people to adventures and peace in the great outdoors. Hi, Anthony.
Hey.
Hi. You were not in high school 5 years ago. You were not. Next to Anthony is Tabitha Montgomery. Tabitha has deep roots in the South Minneapolis community. She serves as the executive director of Powderhorn Park Neighborhood Association and thinks a lot about how community is built and sustained. Welcome, Tabitha. And finally, we have Signe Haraday. Signe is the artistic producing director here at Pillsbury House Theater. And she's a storyteller and the co-founder of the Million Artists Movement. Thanks for opening up your work home for this conversation today.
Great to be with you.
Hi, Signe. All right. Well, Angela, I want to start with you. Since George Floyd was family to you, I want to know, how do you and your family members remember George? And you all called him Perry. How do you all describe his personality?
He had a big personality. Perry was a dreamer. He was always dreaming about something. dreaming about becoming this big NFL player, basketball star. And he also wanted to be a Supreme Court judge. It was one thing that I liked about Perry, because me and him was like the dreamers in the family. And so we kind of like had that in common. But there was another side of Perry where he loved people. He loved community. And he had a soft heart for helping young black men because of what he had been through. He also, was a felon. He got in trouble with the law. And that really, really affected him. And he really wanted to do something really good. And I think he saw the injustices in there. He never really talked about it that much, what happened in there. But I felt like there was something much more going on with that. But, he was just Perry to us, regardless.
You and I have talked about his height, how tall he was.
He was 6'8". We used to call him a tree. We're like, you're the tree, and he knew he was really tall. And sometimes it was so neat when he would come around kids, he would try to scrunch himself down a little bit, because he thought maybe the kids would be kind of scared of him, but they really weren't. They were just surprised of this person so tall. Mm-hmm. He was really tall.
Many of us remember seeing in the news his daughter, Gianna, who mm-hmm. I think at the time was just 6 years old. Mm-hmm. What can you tell us about how Gianna is doing today?
Last time I talked to her mother, maybe like a few months ago, I asked about Gianna. As far as I know, she's doing fine. When all this stuff first happened, she had to go to a private school mm-hmm. because of all the media and all that was going on. But as far as I know, she's doing okay. I'm hoping to see her at the 25th anniversary. Keep my
But the 5th
crossed.
anniversary?
Yeah, for Rise and Remember.
And so how old is she now?
She is
about
10.
11.
She
She's
will
10.
be 11 in December.
And you told me she's tall.
Yeah.
For her age.
She's not like the little girl that said, my daddy changed the world. She was only 6 years old. And I saw her and I'm like, oh my gosh, she's going to be tall like her daddy.
So
she's really tall. Mm-hmm.
I asked how she's doing. How are you doing?
I have my moments. For the most part, I think I have become stronger with all of this. I mean, you have to. And, your back get pushed against the wall, just like the rest of the community. And you do have your moments. I mean, it's been 5 years. It's like, it's so far, but yet so close. You know what I'm saying? That's the best way I can put it.
So today, George Floyd is more than a person. He's a symbol. His name is synonymous with a movement. Jerome, why do you think George Floyd's murder here in Minneapolis is one that started this uprising that we saw all around the world?
Yeah, I think obviously there was so many things happening in that time of 2020. We were obviously in a global pandemic. We were experiencing things we hadn't experienced before. And so we were left to kind of face the realities of what our society has brought, right? And what has been brought. I believe that there was such a reckoning and such an uprising because and I can repeat this as the words of Fannie Lou Hamer. I think young people and the intergeneration in between were simply sick and tired of being sick and tired. And there's such a significance in stillness. And when you are still, you're able to respond and react in a way that is catastrophic. And when I think of uprising and I think of the impact of George Floyd, I think of it as being catastrophic. When we think of George Floyd as a man and the impact that he had in this idea of a movement, it's so much significance because he's a civil rights leader. He's not a martyr. He's not anything less than many of our renowned civil rights leaders, such as Malcolm X and Martin Luther King. And so I'm often encouraged by the ambitions and the excitement of young people, and I think that has certainly have been a pivotal aspect of how we've been able to scale this movement. So
even among young people, among teenagers, there was fatigue. There was already a sense of like not again when he was killed.
Yeah, well, I can tell you the founding of Minnesota Teen Activists was about a week before the passing of George Floyd, and we weren't founded as a mere organization to respond to George Floyd. We were founded because of the plethora of racism and sexual assault and Islamophobia and xenophobia and sexism that is happening in our school districts. And so we had many students across the ISD 191 and SPPS and MPS public school districts who were coming together saying, hey, we have to do something about this issue that's happening in our schools where students are being targeted with racial slurs in New Prague, where a young black student in Prior Lake named Naya Hine is being wrote racial slurs in the bathroom mirror. And I think there's so much that happens in our school systems where once George Floyd was at the tip of the iceberg, it certainly crashed and caused the momentum of young people to lead this movement.
Tabitha, at the time of his death, you were leading the Powderhorn Park Neighborhood Association. Why do you think George Floyd's murder did what it did?
I just got to breathe for a second. Man, you know, Angela, the truth is I don't know. I feel like it was the right ripple in the right pond at the right time that created an unimaginable, devastating cascade. For me to say anything more would be fodder. I have no idea, and yet, as it would, I believe that it almost became scientific, right? There is the preponderance of these moments in our society that causes an equal and opposite response. An equal and opposite response. So depending on where you are at any particular time, on the particular continuum of how we experience one another, I feel as if we believe in a thing like the multiverse, there was a rip in the fabric of time. There was an actual crying out from the soil that said, on this particular day, at this particular moment, there will be a cascade of the ripples.
Janelle, what about you? I mean, looking back 5 years ago, when there had already been a series of high-profile police killings of black men, you know, in states all across the nation, what was it about George Floyd that you think was different?
For me personally, it was the proximity to home. And that, for me, required a different kind of response when it happens in your own backyard.
You were living in Texas and you came back home to Minnesota.
Yeah, at the request of my family. And so I had been in a position navigating the lynchings of black people across the country, but when it happens in the place that you know, that you grew up in, you recognize the corner store. Folks called it Speedway, but I knew it as 7-Eleven, and others as SA. It's different. Why it rippled across the world? I suspect a couple of things. One, I suspect that the impact of COVID-19 forcing people to slow down and pay attention to what is happening. There's no new TV, there's no sports, there was no work, there's nothing to catch our entertainment. We had to pay attention to what was there. Because George Floyd wasn't the first person lynched in 2020 during the pandemic, but I think it's the length of time that we had been quarantined. I also suspect that the pain that people feel of injustices in their own communities, they saw in our pain. And I suspect that because as I paid attention to the protests nationally and internationally, they were crying out George Floyd's name and the name of others that were dear to them. And so I think there was a lot of things, and I think 2020 was a perfect storm, a wrinkle in time, and Why people responded the way we did, I don't know, but we did, and it's important to pay attention.
So let's try to put this into some context. Long before George Floyd was killed, there was, a history of bad and at times a violent relationship between Minneapolis police officers and the people that they are supposed to serve, definitely a lack of trust. So Anthony, you've lived and worked in Minneapolis for decades, done so much work in community engagement. For folks who are not fully aware, how would you put this into context, the murder and the civil unrest that followed? It didn't happen in a vacuum.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think South Minneapolis, one, is really a legacy Black community. And I think it's really easy to not know that necessarily, but really 38th and 4th is a legacy Black community dating back to 1937, 30s, 20s. It was always been there. The other thing is there's been a long history of really violence with police, and I think one of the things that I really think about, one of the war on drugs and the escalation of police violence played itself out really ugly in South Minneapolis. It's one of those people who lived here will tell you, their sons, their brothers, their friends, mass incarceration. There are many, many stories, and I really, the Brothers of Agape, who are not in this panel, but really have a story to tell related to that. It's important. There was even a moment, for those of you who've been here, well, remember 1994, I believe, 1992, the Pizza Shack, murder of Police Hoff. What was happening in that moment that was more interesting was that the police were beginning to have conversations with the vice lords. There was an opportunity, there was a moment where there was something emerging there that could be different. And there was an escalation in that moment. I think there was an intentional escalation in terms of violence against Black men, Black families, and what was happening on the South Side. And that continued through the next 25 years. And so I think, part of, even that day, as you were asking, I think everyone is right. One of the things that in that day that happened is we didn't see the end. We saw the beginning. And I don't know, I've not seen the whole 9 minutes and 20 plus seconds of it, but what I saw was the body camera footage before. And what I saw was a Black man who was being compliant, who was being apologetic, who was actually being remorseful. And the response was an escalation of violence. And I think we saw all of that. In all of these other cases, we only saw the end, or what was there. So there was no fog of war, there was no confusion, there was no darkness, and we couldn't look away. We couldn't look away.
Signe, I know you are a student of history as well. Tell us a little bit about how community members here in South Minneapolis have really always cared for their own, even in the midst of turmoil. How do you describe this environment that we're in?
Oh, that's an interesting question. I think as Anthony brought up in terms of the legacy Black community here, we have always been about building connections and building relationships and nurturing and tendering and finding a way to see each other and be with each other, even when the systems wanted to eradicate that. So I think, and I don't count myself as a historian, so I wouldn't be able to speak to the full depth and breadth of that, but what I can see from my vantage point inside of organizing circles, that we do recognize our work as movement organizers as connected to a long legacy. You evoked the name of Fannie Lou Hamer, Jerome, but there are many leaders within this community who have brought in young people, who have worked intergenerationally to tell the stories, so that we recognize that when we say that's not okay, when we protest, when we sing, when we organize, when we tell stories, when we do the work of actually making justice real, It's in the lineage of many who came before us, and it is for the purpose of the generations to come. And I think that is what feels dangerous to the systems, that we have been able, despite the oppression, the chaos, the pain, the escalatory violence, to persist.
What is it like for you to look? I look around this room and you know, there's a room full of people on a beautiful Tuesday evening. It's 80 degrees and sunny outside, that they chose to be here to be part of this conversation. It feels like a family.
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah, you know, Pillsbury House and Theater on 35th in Chicago, for those folks who are listening, is, as Anthony talked about, at the intersections of 4 communities. That have historically been Black communities, but also a safe place for new Americans, for immigrants, for unhoused folks, even as we navigate the crisis of the multiple pressures of poverty and drug addiction and everything else. But we have been, we are a community that comes together. So when I look in this room and I see the faces of so many organizers, leaders, art makers, people who risk their reputation, who risk their everything to help be the answer. I mean, I think about KRSM Radio, which is the voice of South Minneapolis, 98.9 on the FM dial.
Plug it.
And as a KRSM Radio, you know, which is a part of Pillsbury United Communities, but is community. It is people who didn't feel like they had a voice. They found a way to come together and broadcast their voices across the airways. This theater is a place where people didn't know their stories mattered, and they told their stories and they saw reflections of themselves and each other, and that reverberation back begins to heal our wounds.
After George Floyd was killed, promises were made. Promises that got a lot of news coverage, but were they kept? Anybody want to jump in on that? Jerome, sure. You want to go first?
Plenty that you all can talk about when it comes to our administration and corporate promises, but I'm particularly interested in just the deep sense of promise that we have as people, we as community members, we as Black bodies who have been gentrified, who have been put highways through, and who have been displaced and still given yet a promise unfulfilled. And so when I think about the promise, I think we're actually uniquely positioned to be promise keepers. And I say that to say, I want to lean into the idea, I've been talking to my colleagues, so shout out John up there in Good Trouble, about this idea of the North Star. And I really want to lean into the title here, because it's no coincidence that this idea has come to service to me recently, is that we as a North Star have always been the promise of those who have come from the South and other places to look for the promise of a better opportunity. I think of Emmett Till and his family who traveled to Chicago and other places for the promise of a better life. And I'm so excited to know that us as community members have fully stepped into keeping the promises to create a better future for the rest of the world. We in Minnesota have been through so many ideas and scenarios of resistance through the Rondo community, the North community, the South Side community, and yet every time we've been able to keep the promises towards our community. And that is so unique and that is so astonishing to me when I think about even the unique ideas that we create and innovation around organizing, where my friends and people who watched us in different places like New York and Louisville and Tokyo and all these places were asking, how did you all organize in this way? How did you all turn an entire gas station into a corridor? How did you all manage to get thousands of young people to walk out? How did you all manage to really change the narrative that George Floyd was depicted across the entire world by our counterparts and really lean into the significance that our community and he had to fulfill the promise. And so I'm not concerned of the promise of a dollar amount. I'm not concerned of the promise of an administration, but I'm yet concerned about the promise that this soil has had for us since the beginning, that we've been able to migrate to this place. And I think of us being obviously like the Jim Crow of the North, right? And there's so much progress to be made. But I think we have to recognize and sit in and understand that we are quite literally blueprints and innovators and promise keepers for the rest of the world.
Thank you, Jerome. Janelle, what would you say about promises that were made? Were they kept?
First, I want to thank Jerome for your response. It's so important for this work to be intergenerational because I feel like you have a hope that I want to catch up to.
Amen.
Right? I think so many people know about the 24 demands of justice that were crafted in community at George Floyd Square, and they were the reasons why the street stayed closed for over a year. In August, a handful of us were called into a meeting, and
August of
2020. Sorry,
okay, August of 2020.
We are 5 years later.
I know.
A handful of us were called into a meeting, and the discussion was around would the streets reopen or would they stay closed? And my neighbor, Amasha Howard, and I, we kind of said, well, we can't reopen the streets until the community also gets justice, because how are we going to address the systemic racism that created the conditions for George Floyd's death? And we were told they asked, well, what does justice look like? And we said, we have to go back and ask our neighbors. And they said, you got 24 hours. And we're like, okay. So we ran up and down the streets, and with the help of the executive directors of the neighborhood organizations, asking people, what does justice look like? What do you need? What do you want? And then we condensed that list to 24 demands. And what surprised me was it was low-hanging fruit. People were asking for jobs for youth. They were asking for the ability to live in their neighborhood that they grew up in and to return. They were asking for affordable housing and to be able to be homeowners. They were asking for things for livability and safety. And I think we even added to the 24 demands the livability and safety platform that so many people in the community prior to 2020 had worked on, looking at what does safety look like in our community. But what we saw was a very slow response to being able to address the things that people were asking for. And Tabitha, who's behind me, she's one of the most brilliant people I know. And she would often remind me, it's like, this is what systems do. Like, this is like you can't expect anything less. And so she would say, I remember in 2020, she's like, we have to shoot for the stars. Like, we have to ask for it all. Because we deserve it all. And she's like, we have to think big and ask. And I feel like the 24 demands didn't even go as big as I think what Tabitha was kind of trying to push us for. But then, and I think that is why it surprised me when not even the 24 demands were something that people were interested in fulfilling, because it was so easy to do those things and make a small portion of our community happy. And instead, I was met with a response of, well, if we do this for your community in George Floyd Square, we have to do it for all of Minneapolis. So be it.
Oh, okay. Anthony, promises were made. Were they kept?
No. And And I think I really appreciate Jerome's answer. I appreciate Janelle's answer, and I agree with you, Janelle. So often I look at you the way you just looked at Jerome. So this intergenerational, I mean, it really is that thing that happens, and I just go, thank God Janelle's here, right? But I think there's something there. I think that the piece for me is really that. It is what happened after. I think that I agree. It is in a contract about those promises that the corporate response itself is what systems do. If there was a concern that there was a need for an appropriate response related to their brand, it was not about the community of people. And so we needed to see that right away and not hold any credence to that, right? The things that were really important were the mutual aid that was created, like the number of different organizations. And even when we think about what is it we memorialize, in my mind, we memorialize the organic human responses to care for other humans. Mm-hmm. Right? It is like that's real. And I think, and no one will be surprised that I rode a lot of bikes during that period. And one of the things I did every day is I rode my bike down Lake Street from St. Paul to Wayzata. And then I rode back on 38th Street. And then I rode back through Franklin downtown. And all I did was notice the artists as first responders. Right? I mean, and I think that is really for us to really understand, right? That the promises that we saw in the paper, that was not about that. It is this, and the truth of the matter is, I mean, honestly, Jerome, I go, can we keep that promise to each other? Like, there's a question for us. Can we keep the promise of that moment we were making to each other in the street? When we were marching and we were talking to our family in Nairobi and in Paris and in Sacramento simultaneously, right? Can we keep that promise to each other, to be there, to actually fight injustice, to see it, to call it out, to continue to be truth tellers? And I do believe that Black people have a unique responsibility.
Tabitha, when we look at the status of social justice issues today, to many people it feels like we're going backwards. We're seeing a backlash to some of the progress that was made generations ago. And so does this moment in time to you feel like we've made 2 steps forward, but 1 big step back?
Oh, if we allow it. If we allow this idea that the language that is being questioned or making people uncomfortable, if we pretend that those are the only words in our lexicon, then yes, we will take 2 steps back. But I can think of 1,000 other words right here on this stage that represents equity and justice and inclusion, starting with the word love. And then I could go into service, and then I could go into kindness. I could go on. And so as long as they are not asking me to give back all the words, Angela, I'm okay with some of the words that they are questioning, because I'm super clear on what it means to be a part of the fabric of community. And I just shout out to, we all have done, we are a part of the appreciation crew. Certainly the wisdom, Jerome, that you spoke, asking about us to think deeper about what we mean by promise and it not just be quantifiable. And then the naming specifically of were promises met or advanced, and being declarative with a no, and being really great at bringing us back into the moment of when community is often asked, invited, encouraged to tell leaders what you need, and then it to be met with resistance. So the container that we are collectively creating, I think, is one of creating memory. And yet, what I will say about this idea of where are we in this moment, every moment that we are in, I submit, requires our best effort, requires our best work. And so this idea even of a promise, I'm not as sometimes dismayed about promises that can be broken, because oftentimes my mother, who loves me immensely, my father, who loves me dearly, would make a promise to attend a thing, to do a thing, and it wasn't met. But what I can tell you unequivocally is that the quality of how they loved me always was on display. The quality of their effort was always clear. They were always acting in a manner that I believed in the promise. And so it is more important that we really think about, are we behaving in a high fidelity, quality manner be in community together? Keep your promise. Because I understand that promises can't always be met for this, that, and the third and the other thing, but it is important that we actually think about, are we behaving in a high fidelity way, whatever role that you occupy? Are you prepared for the meeting to make a proposal about that particular ordinance on that particular day so that we're not constantly caught in Groundhog's Day? Are you prepared to name the number and the true cost of investing in community, and so that we're not pretending that the $1 million investment, the $2 million investment, when we know it's a $1 trillion investment, is what you continue to name? Are we behaving in a high quality way when we know that the needs in the community is worth the size of US Bank Stadium, but you want me to get excited about one position of an investment in our community? And so I am questioning the quality of how we show up. I am questioning the quality of what we claim that we want. And are we willing to do the work to be the quilt that we are, as opposed to patches that keep coming undone when people question words? Keep your words, keep inclusion, keep equity, keep diversity, because I got 20,000 others.
Angela, I'm thinking 5 years ago, behind the scenes, family members were meeting with all kinds of folks talking about the murder of George Floyd. And so how do you think about where we are today, 5 years later? Conversations that were had, promises that were made, or just, what words people were expressing? Like, have people followed through?
Well, first I want to say I give hope to Jerome. Thank you for keeping hope alive. But here's how I see it. 5 years ago, I tried to hit us to the core, to the raw. There were people that became part of the change, but then there were people that became the change. That's a difference. You know what I'm saying? And what I mean by that is that when you become the change, the things that you're going to lose, you're going to lose the comfort zone. You're going to lose the privileges, white privileges, or whatever you're benefiting. You're going to risk losing that. You're also going to lose your silence. That's a difference. And so, the people that become the change, they're not going to be sitting on the sidelines. They're going to be in the midst of the fire, not just in 2020, not in 2021. They're going to still be doing it. So you got a lot of people that were excited and a lot of people that were really, really had good intentions, and they want to be a part of something. And that's exciting. But it's a difference when you become that change. When you become that change, you become that voice. You become that movement, not a moment. And I think that's the missing link of all of this. And so today, I think the question not to ask what's going on in 2020, who are the people and what are actions that are being taken place in 2025? Who are the people that are still pushing it, still marching, still going through the mourning, the grieving, still making the policies? These are the people that are still at the core because they became the change. And that's what has to take place. Not just the rah-rah, not just in the moment, but in the movement. You have to become the movement. Because the bottom line is, if there was enough people that became the change, the system just wouldn't be shaken and cause initiative, health initiatives, employment initiatives, judicial initiatives. The system would have been broken. And that's what we need, is for the systems that have held Black and brown people back, they need to be broken. But with that said, I'm so thankful that it was shaken enough that caused people to stand up and to do something. And there were things done that we should be proud of because people gave their life, they gave their time. But what I'm saying is that you have to become the change. Because when you become the change, you speak volumes in humanity. And people don't have but a choice but to listen. Thank you.
And Signe, how do you think about the change of the last 5 years and promises or conversations that were made and what you're actually seeing today?
Woo. I mean, that's a word, that's a lesson, that's a question, that's a lot. I think I'm going to start with myself. I am transformed. I don't know if I get to call myself the change, but I will say that what I have learned over the last 5 years, and before that in movement work too, but I'm reminded, because community holds me accountable every single day, that it's my job. The ancestors have told me that I can't wait on someone else to do what needs to be done.
Yes.
So I agree with what everyone has said. Keep the hope alive. Be the change. Ask for the demands. Fidelity. Drop them words, Tabitha. And no, Anthony, they didn't keep their promise. But I think what I want to do is keep mine.
Yeah.
And I want to be vulnerable in community. I want to name when I mess up. I want to link arms so that we can build something better. Because what this moment, I think, offers us, through the tears, through the grief, through the pain, through the loss, through the sorrow, is that all of these systems that are deeply broken, or rather made to break us, we can make a new thing. And that's what I think this moment is about, and I want to be a part of that, and I want to work with anybody who wants to stand up and say, we're going to make something better.
Can I ask you about, as we talk about words, a couple of words I want to ask about. Healing. The word healing has come up a lot for me as a talk show host. But healing from what? I mean, healing from George Floyd's murder, healing from the destructive aftermath. Is it healing from centuries of personal and systemic racism? Is it, I mean, there's so much to heal from. And so for each of you, how do you think about healing? And are you checking in with yourself? Are you checking in with the people you work with and that you're close to? What does healing look like or feel like to you personally, Janelle?
Yes, to all of the above that you said. I think there's so many layers to healing. George Floyd Square has 5 assumptions, and the 5th assumption is that assume that everyone has some level of trauma, and that we must be patient with each other so we can be dangerous together.
Oh, okay. For the folks who listen on the radio, we had a little call and response there. So you said, Janelle, what? Say that again.
We need to be patient with each other so we can be dangerous together.
Will you say
All 5?
Yes, please.
Okay.
A request from the audience, all 5.
All 5.
Take
George
care.
Floyd Square assumption number 1, assume everybody has COVID, so mask up or back up.
6 feet.
Assumption number 2, assume everybody is armed. It pays to be polite. Assumption number 3, assume that everything you say or do is being recorded. So if you're going to say something, say it with your whole chest. Assumption number 4, assume that not everybody in this square or in this circle or in this room has the same idea of liberation in mind. Mm-hmm. Assumption number 5, assume that everyone is going through some level of trauma. So let us be patient with each other so we can be dangerous together. And those assumptions have really carried us through and kind of anchored us as a community, as neighbors, in this space, the intersection of 4 neighborhoods. And I think part of the reason why the neighbors, the residents, came together was because there was very little communication during the uprising. When you have 4 neighborhoods, 2 city council wards, you have all of these political dynamics going around, and neighbors weren't getting information, so they just decided to meet on the streets. And it began with people bringing their lawn chairs and meeting on 38th Street or meeting on Chicago Avenue. And these assumptions were created and formed so that everybody could at least start on the same playing ground. And we would be required to announce our intersection, so we would also have an understanding if we were local or if people were coming from afar or if people were oppressed. So that kind of shaped our world as people living in or near the intersection where George Floyd took his last breath. Healing is necessary, and it is layered. I recognize, especially over these past 5 years, when even having conversations with people who live in the Twin Cities, it is a very different experience when where your home is during the uprising, if it was under immediate threat by fires. If you saw the military driving down the street as if it were a Sunday afternoon, if you saw tear gas, rubber bullets in your own neighborhood, if the protests were marching down the street in your own neighborhood, it was a different kind of trauma. And our neighbors in George Floyd Square, I remember it was very clear during the first anniversary when we were asking people what is okay and what is not okay. People said anything but fireworks. Because the trauma in our bodies, when you just hear a sound that sounds like a gun going off, like we feel that in our bodies. Signe and I were just talking about just the month of May. Like we feel it in our bodies. I was telling the story of being on the protest highway when the truck came at us. I still cry when I tell that story. And there's the 400 years of oppression, of trauma that lives through our bodies. There's the tension that exists in our neighborhood because of our ancestral traumas. So yes, we need to heal from all of it and all the things that happened after the 2020 uprising that added to the stress and the economy and trying to figure out finances and jobs and just being human, like all of those things. The kids, we had a kid in our neighborhood who committed suicide. Stress. It's a lot.
It's a lot. I mentioned to a number of you, and Anthony, I said this to you before we started the program, the fact that it's like in the mid-80s today, the heat as I was driving here. And so I was like, oh, it feels like it's Memorial Day. And it feels like there is still grief hanging in the air. How do you think about healing when you're biking or talking to someone, Anthony? What do you think about healing?
You know, I actually try not to say the word. Because I think, I really, just as you talk about liberation means something, you never know. Healing has all of these different ways of thinking about it. And so, what I do think about is the possibility of post-traumatic growth. I think about what is it we do, and what are the ways that individuals and communities, really grow in deep and unexpected ways after unimaginable, life-threatening experiences. And not by bouncing back or ignoring the pain, right? But really leaning into that and seeing if there's a way that where we break open and we transform. And I don't know who used the word transform, but that was really what I think about. And I think that a lot of that begins with self-study. A lot of that begins with the really understanding. It really is understanding the ways that the people who love us and the communities we live in have been traumatized, right? And what is it that we do around those things so that we can find growth, so that we can find patience, not just with our community, with ourselves, right? There's a way where that patience with yourself is foundational. And I really do, and I think about that in terms of my own life, in terms of people who know me or don't know me, but we lived through unimaginable trauma. And the truth of the matter is, does that pain, are we able to metabolize that pain in a way that then lays a foundation for growth in terms of the way that we move in the world? And the truth is, it leads us into our deepest and most compassionate humanity. And that's the opportunity that we do that. But it really is steeped in those things and trying to find a deeper appreciation for life, about new possibilities, about inspired personal and collective power and agency. And ultimately, it's about connectedness. It is about the ways that we connect in community and family, and that it leads us to this transformation, this possibility of transformation.
Tabitha, another word for you. How do you think about the word healing?
One of the things I love that you asked, though, is heal from what? I thought that was so profound, because it's hanging with me a bit. And y'all, I feel like I want to say this, like certainly to the listeners, is that you don't know me, but I feel so wedded to you. And I feel like since the very beginning that I've had a memory, I've understood in some ways that not all the things that exist wants to be wedded to me. And I feel like that has created a deep, ongoing, abiding brokenness in my psyche about understanding that this world, this place, is this endless quilt, this endless tapestry where we're all, in theory, supposed to be knitted together because we all exist. And so everyone's agency is so real and undeniable and intrinsic all by itself. And yet we are this beautiful whole ecosystem if we would allow it. And so I feel like I'm constantly trying to heal from that truth that I hold deeply for myself, that not everybody wants to be wedded and quilted to me. But I see it so clearly that they are a part of how I become great. I think that is what I'm always thinking, that in moments like these, where it continues to be a tear in the fabric of time, where we feel like we are trying to pull as far away from each other as possible, when we distill down the way that we look, or the way that we talk, and the way that we walk, and the way that we think, into the reasons why we can't be the quilt. This is what I'm trying to heal from. And this particular moment that we are reflecting on is a part of how we get to places where we feel that we should not be knitted together. And so what do I do with that? What are we doing with that? How am I holding that whelp? I think that I've just accepted that I am going to be in a perpetual state of trying to be better today than I was yesterday. And that as a part of that ongoing work, I think it just simply means for me that I am going to do everything that I can to be as well as I can for myself and for others, which means that I can hold this tension in this space of understanding that the very people and things in this world, including the land and everything that breathes or does not, is a part of what I should serve, then that is the mandate. I am well in service in truth. I am well in respite in truth. I am well in holding this deeper truth about what I think it means for me to be in this world, and I won't let anybody have it. That's how I heal. I decide. I decide who is my quilt. You don't get to tell me who's my blanket, because I'm claiming all of y'all. And so you may not like it. I won't touch you without permission, but you just need to know that wherever you are right now in your car, I hope that you are streaming this so far because of our brilliant and beautiful host. But just know that I am woven to you in a real way. And I will not yield that belief, regardless of who says what about who is in the quilt and who is out of the quilt.
Signe, how should we be thinking about healing? Like, I don't, because like, again, for me, it comes and goes in waves, but I'll say it again, it still feels to me like there's still grief hanging in the air.
Oh, for sure. I mean, I think I'm someone who has had a lot of grief in my own personal life. And so I don't see grief as something that we should move through. Grief is kind of like a bedfellow for me. And that doesn't have to be true for you, but it's true for me. And what I have come to learn about grief is that it's not about move over, it's how do we spoon?
Okay, wait a minute. How do we get to spooning here?
I know.
I think I'm with you, but tell me more.
So the idea here is that grief isn't this thing that we pass through, we get over, we move aside. In my estimation, it's actually something that allows us to be more expansive, that allows us to be more connected to our own humanness, to be more connected to other people, to be more connected with life and the universe and all the things that is. Because grief is something that actually does knit us together, if we want to be honest about it. And I'll say this about healing beyond that. I like to say I meet folks sometimes who are more wedded to their trauma than they are married to their healing. So yes, Tabitha, we gonna be in a quilt together, for sure. And collective healing is also important. And I might not have to do that with absolutely everybody, but if you are down to do it with me, I am down to do it with you. I believe you can love a stranger.
Jerome, how do you think about healing?
Yeah. The reality is healing is hard. Healing, as you said, is constant. Healing is, as my friends teach me, evolving. Healing is never necessarily ending. And I'm particularly interested in the idea of deliverance, this deep sense of feeling set free from something, some place, some idea, some struggle. And so as we constantly deliver ourselves and set ourselves free from these barriers and things that hold us feeling so oppressed, I think we'll continuously and always heal. Think of a wound, think of a scratch. It's continuously evolving, it's continuously healing. But healing is hard. And so often we reckon with healing by fighting or turning our pain into power and being resilient. And we don't sit enough with just like the joy and the genius of Black and brown people. And I think as much as we put towards the front lines work, as much as we put towards this movement, it is equally important that we be intentional about how we are delivering ourselves and our people around us in the midst of healing. I think about healing as an evolving thing because our traumas consistently happen. And it was clear that folks were traumatized and struggling to find healing after 2020 because the response that was so catastrophic for George Floyd wasn't for Daunte Wright, wasn't for Amir Locke, wasn't for Khalil Azad, wasn't for Ricky Cobbs. And so this idea of fatigue and a lost sense of deliverance has gotten us so far from being able to work through this movement in the spirit of healing in the spirit of joy. And I think we should be more intentional, more thoughtful about how we convene with each other through the ideas of joy, and how we don't name it as a social justice gathering or opportunity to call the names of those who are under the ground, but instead we find moments to be happy, find moments to heal. The reason why our ancestors and those before us were able to create a platform for us to move and operate in the ways that we so privileged have today as Black and brown people is because they had a deep sense of not only deliverance, but of joy and family and convening and celebrating and victory and happiness. And we've lost this sense of happiness in our work, where it feels so dark, and it never should be feeling dark outside of our pain and our grief. Why would we take on the assumptions and the bias and the wrongdoings of other people and call it our pain? We don't have to own that. We don't have to accept that and make it a reality for ourselves. Whatever you decide to believe in, however you decide to respond, yes, it affects my community, but I'm not claiming that, and I'm not putting that on my body. And so I think as we detach ourselves from holding the responsibility of fixing things that people do wrong, and instead hold the responsibility of celebrating ourselves for how we've done good, we'd reach closer to this arrival or this destination of healing and deliverance.
May I respond to that?
Yes.
Is that okay?
Mm-hmm.
So I think what's so fascinating, because of the work that we do in George Floyd Square, preserving the memorial offerings, and then every year holding an annual festival, we've actually come under critique for having a festival around the anniversary of George Floyd, because in some people's minds, they think that we are supposed to be sad all the time. And we have had to do intentional work at Rise and Remember to say it is okay to have joy. And there's something in this, when you're able to embrace grief as a part of the human experience, and I think of this reality when we embrace the narratives and the stories through a Sankofa lens, where we're constantly looking back to understand where we're going, to remember our ancestors, to remember those gone too soon, doesn't mean that we are in a perpetual state of sorrow and sadness and depression. And it is okay. And tears don't mean that you're in a perpetual state of sorrow and depression. Tears can be healing in and of themselves. And I think part of the challenge is whiteness demands that we think linearly. And we need to be able to let that go, and embrace traditions that allow us to go back and remember and think about how we are going to go forward differently. Then go back and remember and allow that to shape how we go forward, and go back and remember. And it's okay to have that relationship, and in it find joy, right? And in it practice joy. Joy isn't absent of grief. It's marbled together. And we've found that in our work, it's been a challenge to get society to understand that. And so we continue to hold a festival and call it a festival. And it's important that people understand that we can celebrate Blackness and the beauty of it, and commemorate and honor our ancestors gone too soon, and also just be.
Thank you, Janelle. Angela, it is not lost on me that you are a registered nurse. you as a profession, you've chosen to work in healing the body. But talk to me about healing from emotional wounds and how you and your family members have addressed healing.
Well, one thing I want to say when it comes to healing or grief, you cannot put a start date on neither one of them. And you definitely can't put an expiration date. It just doesn't work that way. It is a process. And I remember after learning the murder of my nephew, I'm traumatized, crying all over the place. Then there's some family members, because of the way they were raised, the stoic, being strong, they're trying to be strong for everybody else. And so I remember his brother Terrence, about 3 years down the road, said, "Angela, I haven't really cried yet." He said, "It's been 3 years and I haven't really cried yet." And so as the family, we had to learn that we all knew him differently, and the ones that didn't get a chance to know him had regrets along with the grief and going through the mourning and all of that. And so what I'm trying to figure out, that this grief and mourning thing, it's not easy. You're constantly adjusting. Like I had to adjust without Perry. I was used to Perry calling me, "What's up, Auntie? What you doing today?" I said, "Here we go again." But now I'm like, I wish you would call me sometimes. But I know that's not going to happen. So you're learning how to readjust your life without your loved ones. And I really like what you said, Janelle, that it's okay to have a moment when you smile again. It's okay to feel joy. Yeah, sometimes you're going to cry, like I feel like crying now. Yeah. But I just want to say, we have to know it's okay. But the most important thing, how I got through it, 38 in Chicago, I love you. As a community, they wrapped their arms around me. They didn't know me at all, but they accepted me into their community. And what I've learned from that is that you don't have to go through this process alone. Even though sometimes you want to be by yourself with grief, and it's okay to feel that way. But we don't have to be alone going through this process. It's okay for people to hug us and to check on us. We don't have to try to be the superwoman or the superman to do everything. It's okay. And I had to learn that. And so it's a process. Now, with healing does come improvements of yourself, of the community, of rebuilding, trying to restructure things. And that's even hard to see that change, because I know the memorial is going to look different during the reconstruction. But it's necessary. But just let you all know that you will smile again and you will have joy in the morning, like the Bible says.
Thank you. In closing, I want to share this. There's a famous saying that is attributed to the African continent that I'm sure many of you have heard before. It says, if we want to go fast, we go alone. If we want to go far, we go together. And so I really do feel like that is what we witnessed here tonight. Each of you have brought such wonderful and unique perspectives and strengths also to this journey that we are on. And I'm thankful for each of you. So thank you so much for sharing what you shared. I want to name our guests again for our listening audience. We've been listening to Angela Harrelson, George Floyd's aunt and a nurse here in the Twin Cities. Janelle Austin, the founder of the Racial Agency Initiative and executive director of Rise and Remember. Jerome Richardson, co-founder of the youth-led Global Teen Activists. Anthony Taylor, community development lead for the Cultural Wellness Center and an outdoor educator and activist. Tabitha Montgomery, executive director of the Powderhorn Park Neighborhood Association. And Signe Haraday, artistic producing director at Pillsbury House and Theater and lead local organizer for the Million Artists Movement. Thank you. And thank you to our audience who joined us here today at Pillsbury. Doing these discussions in community is so important to us here at NPR News, and so we're just so grateful that you took time to be with us for this NPR News North Star Journey Live. Thank you again to our listeners. Here's to remembering and growing together. We'll talk again. Thank you.
Okay, we're off air. So
Yes. Are we done recording? Okay, I can't promise that, Jerome. I don't want to. But Jerome has more to say. Are we done with our official recording? Yes, we are. You're
I just want to say before everyone gets moving your bodies, right? Just freeze where you are. Okay? Like, this was really, really heavy. Okay? So, like, this is not, we just come into a room and we have a heavy conversation and we just go out into the world and thrive, because it doesn't happen like that. So, one way I want us to just leave this space and just ground ourselves, because I feel like there's some frogs in some people's throats still. There's some emotions going, right? And I know I can't personally leave and just be like, okay, what's next? Okay? So I'm going to do something that I don't know if I'm allowed to do, but two things can happen.
You allowed.
Two things can happen.
Well, you're doing it. So.
I'm the young person, so I can do that. So either we can do the Assata Shakur chant, or this wonderful woman can help ground us in a way before we leave.
Oh, yes.
Which one would y'all like to happen?
Mother tune.
Both?
Both.
All right.
Both.
I'm a mic toss real quick. You got it? Okay, cool. Put your feet flat on the ground. Thank you.
It is well with my soul. We don't know who will pay reparations for my soul. My soul looks back and wonder how I got over. It is amazing grace. Amazing grace. Amazing grace. How sweet the sound. It is now and then and forever. That your voice will ring in my head. I have a son. Four sons, actually. One who has given you amazing wisdom. One who had a kidney and liver transplant 37 days ago. He is standing like you, feeling like you, speaking like you, becoming a preacher, becoming a person who knows the distinction between life and death, who knows the joy in being on the other side, seeing from the other side, and standing on this side, which is what you are doing. Each of you. You are doing and being and coming into yourselves as did creation. You are coming into yourselves as did creation. And once again, for that, I thank you for voicing and being so purely grounded in the power, once again, of soul medicine. Practitioner of soul medicine. People, all of us, of soul music and soul food, but more than anything, it is well with our souls, yes? Yes. Yes? Yes. Thank you so much for calling me out.
Don't you just feel better?
Good night, everybody.